Everyone, thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you for coming to this extraordinary council meeting tonight. We have one topic to discuss, but I'd like to remind obviously everyone that this is recorded, and because it will be, I'm sure, of interest to members of the public, make sure you speak very clearly into the microphone. Before I start, I think James wants to have a quick word.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to provide members with a bit of an update following discussions that took place at the last council meeting. Members may recall that the leader of the Conservative group requested that I sent him a detailed explanation setting out why it was the council's position that the KC's advice pertaining to the LG final submission being an executive decision as opposed to a council decision was subject to a legal advice privilege and therefore not disclosable to the wider membership of the council. Following that meeting, I did indeed provide the explanation and engaged in further discussions with Councillor Deering around the nature of the legal advice privilege and how it was relevant to the KC's advice. And as a result of those discussions, I contacted the KC and asked if he could prepare a separate note summarising his earlier advice that would be capable of being shared without waiving privilege in the original advice. And on Tuesday this week, I received that note. I have since shared that note with all group leaders as well as with all independent members of the council. And members should have seen that the KC is clear in its advice that the final submission is not and cannot be one for full council, and that the views of full council are purely advisory in nature. That aligns with the advice I provided at the last meeting and is in keeping with tonight's meeting, being one at which members can cast an indicative vote on the preferred option for the final LGR submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shane. Bob?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much also, James. If I could just say, yes, you're absolutely right that we had a conversation at the last council meeting, didn't we? And then we've had a correspondence following that. And I appreciate your efforts in that correspondence, James. But nevertheless, I have to say, I think it's very unsatisfactory when we have, when we make public reference in the public domain to something, a document, and that document is not freely available to members and members of the public. The KC's opinion, i.e. the original KC's opinion, is referred to on the very, very first page of the leader's report in tonight's papers. Those papers are obviously absolutely in the public domain, and it's clearly inherently unsatisfactory that the document that's referred to in a public domain document is not made available. Now, all that said, I totally accept that the note that the KC has provided is extremely clear. I've got no reason to doubt the accuracy of what he's saying, but it does still mean that we are proceeding in the rather extraordinary circumstance of relying on a note of a note, which I think is clearly also inherently unsatisfactory. So I am going to say that I do hope in future that if any document is referred to in a public domain meeting or public domain papers that are published and are available to members of the public, whatever that document is, it should be available, full stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Apologies for absence.
We've got apologies tonight from Councillors Butcher, Burt, Defley, Jacobs, Wiley and Walkham.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. No, I didn't think so. Thank you. So the main item tonight then, the local government reorganisation in Hertfordshire. I think this is for you, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. As this report explains, in February, the government invited all councils in Hertfordshire to develop proposals for a single tier of local government for the county, to replace both county council and districts and boroughs with new unitary councils. That request and associated information are shown in pages 18 to 25 of the report pack. Since February, all 11 Hertfordshire councils and the PCC, the Police and Crime Commissioner, have worked together to develop 3 separate unitary options for Hertfordshire: a 2-unitary, a 3-unitary, and a 4-unitary model. And it is these that we are discussing tonight. The spine document covering the overall transformation is on pages 26 to 199. of the report pack with each of the 3 unitary options included in the subsequent document. It's worth noting that Hertfordshire is unusual in that all leaders of all parties have worked together to create a jointly agreed submission. I think it's also fair to say that most of the leaders also agree that this is not our preference, but the government is clear in its direction. So you've all received the final copy of the joint submission to the government, which will be sent off by the 28th of November this year. You'll see on page 30 of the pack that there is space in that submission where each council can express its preference for one of these 3 unitary options. That is all we at East Herts Council can do, express a preference. That is, the government makes the final decision, and we expect to hear that decision sometime, hopefully by July next year. So tonight we have an opportunity to discuss those 3 unitary options and to take an indicative vote on which of those 3 options members prefer. As our monitoring officer explained at our last full council and has repeated tonight, the final decision on which of the 3 options East Herts Council chooses as a preference in that submission lies with the executive, and that decision will be taken at the executive meeting on the 18th of November. But it will take into consideration the discussion and indicative vote tonight. To help clarify the decision-making process, on Tuesday, I think James has already mentioned that he circulated a letter from RKC, and I trust that that's been shared with all of you so that you have a clear view of the decision-making process. So while, as I said, the executive will decide our council's preference and the government will be making the final choice, tonight's decision is an important part of that process as it'll help the executive reach its decision. This report has 3 recommendations, and I just want to clarify them before we get into the discussion. Option A is straightforward, the 2 unitary option. Options B and C, the 3 and the 4 unitary models, both include a request to the Secretary of State to modify existing district and borough boundaries when the switch to unitary takes place. Those proposed boundary changes are illustrated on page 28 of the report pack. Why these requests? Council leaders all agreed that in the 3 unitary case, option B, a small boundary change should move wards from Bushey in Bushey from Hertsmere into the West Hertfordshire unitary for reasons around local identity. In the 4 unitary case, the changes are rather more substantial, with large areas of North Herts and an area in the south of Welland and Hatfield moving into the Eastern Hertfordshire unitary, joining us in East Herts with Broxbourne. This is primarily around increasing the total population of what would be our Eastern Herts unitary from 250,000 to about 280,000. So with those details in mind, I propose that report to council.
Thank you very much, Ben. Seconder for that? Maoni?
Yes, Chairman, I'm happy to second this. I reserve my right to speak. And furthermore, I would like to call for a recorded vote when we finally vote on these matters. So I'm asking for a recorded vote, and I believe I have 5 other people who will also we have to stand
Certainly. If you could,
and ask for a recorded vote at the end, please.
thank you very much. We okay? Thank you. Eric?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question of procedure. You may be about to do this. I think before we debate this, we need to understand what the voting procedure is. Now, my understanding is that each one of us can only vote for one of the 3 options or abstain from all of it. So I just need to understand how we're going to be doing that. If you could explain. Thank you, Chairman.
Certainly. So out of the options A, B and C, there will be an abstention option as well in this instance. We will do a recorded vote so that you'll be asked in turn which option you will choose. You'll vote, you will obviously call out your name and vote accordingly. And that will be then totaled up, and I'll read out the results at the end. Are you okay?
Yeah, usually we shout out for or against. So if we shout out for this time,
Sorry then, for this time, yeah. Certainly. Okay, on that note, Marnie, you said you reserved the right. And I think Ben will have a right to reply, obviously, at the end of the session. So comments and questions. Oh, sorry, you don't need to. Bob got in first. Bob.
Thank you again, Chairman. Speaking from this side of the chamber, I think we would have liked to have known first what the administration's view is on the proposals in front of us tonight. I see that I think both the leader and the deputy leader reserve their right to come back to us later. I don't know whether they might feel that it would be helpful to comment now.
Sorry, Bob. Okay, sorry, no problem.
Okay, all right. Well, on the basis that the leader and the deputy are going to hold fire, I'm sure that members of my group will come in and contribute to this debate. But certainly our headline position is that we are not happy with the idea of reorganising local government in Hertfordshire. As everybody knows, it's in the papers. We've talked about this for months and months and months. We all know we have 11 councils in Hertfordshire. It's the county and the 10 districts. The county provides about 80% of the services to our residents. Those very well-known services are provided on a county-wide basis. Education, schools, adults, children's, waste, highways, all provided on a full county-wide basis. Certainly, as at the time of the county elections in May, although nothing in life is perfect, it couldn't be said that the services that the county are providing are failing. The children's services were Ofsted rated outstanding. And as at the time of the election, the adult services were the second highest rated in the country. So it seems very strongly to us in the Conservative group that the system ain't broke and does not need to be fixed. To just stay with the county for a moment, as far as I can make out, the proposals are extraordinarily vague as to how these county-wide services will be provided in a unitary structure. Whether we end up with 3 or 4 unitaries or whatever it is, I can't myself understand how it's going to help to break up these county-wide services into a handful of smaller and different providers. It's just mystifying. Then, of course, there's the question of the mayor. Well, again, I think in our group, we are strongly against having an elected mayor coming in and sitting on top of the unitaries. I think, like so many things with this Labour government, the ground has shifted since this reorganisation was first mooted. We now hear, I think, noises to the effect that it will promote efficiency and whatnot, and that to achieve efficiency, we need to get rid of the current 2-tier system. Well, the current 2-tier system is county and the districts. How it will be an improvement to have a new 2-tier system, which will be the mayor and the unitaries, is completely beyond me. You know, I think certainly in our group, and it may very well be that other members in the chamber this evening feel the same way. I'm afraid so. This smacks of yet another inept proposal from the very struggling Labour government. It smacks, frankly, of gerrymandering, and one wonders what it will achieve. Anybody that's been around the loop a few times in this room knows very well that local government reorganisation costs a huge amount of money. If there were to be a mayor's office, no doubt that will grow like Topsy and suck up an enormous amount of taxpayers' money. So for the sake of what does seem to be an exercise in gerrymandering, we are against, in principle, local government reorganisation as proposed and the imposition of a mayor on top of us. And one final thing I'll say, and then I'll leave my members of my group to come in. There's also the business of the localisation of democracy, isn't there? Speaking for this council may not provide the range of services that the county council provides, but the services this council does provide are important, and our residents relate to this council for those services. Perhaps the most obvious one is planning. If a resident of East Herts has a planning problem, they may or may not be content with the approach taken by the council and officers towards their particular problem. But it's clear that they do relate to the fact that East Herts District Council isn't very far away from where they live. And if we break all this up and we just have whatever it may be, 3 or 4 unitaries, for most people, the point of democracy will be much further away from where they live. And I and my group don't understand how that will be an improvement on the current state of affairs. Clearly, just to finish, if these proposals go through, it will lead to a great reduction in the number of councillors. And yes, you know, we can see that that will remove some costs from the system, but every councillor is a representative of the public. And if we go from what might it be, 500 or 600 councillors to 240 councillors, we're diluting the access of the public into the democratic system. So in a nutshell, there are our comments in overarching comments, but I know that various members of my group will also give you the benefit of their views in a few moments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bob. Just within your 5 minutes or thereabouts, anyway. Joe, do you want to speak?
Thank you very much, Martin. And thank you, Bob. I think you said a bit of what I was going to say anyway. I mean, I think my initial thing is I've got some big concerns about LGR and the process and the finances and the bigger picture. So I think for me, it's made me sort of think, you know, more about, or what I wanted to talk about is more like the purpose of local government. And perhaps it's an opportunity to think about, you know, what we're here for and what we do and what, you know, what local government's actually for. Obviously, the question of whether we have 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, unitaries, that's why we're here. But I think thinking about local government, because we don't often get the opportunity to have the sort of bigger think, this is a good opportunity to do that. When I joined the executive, the first thing I was interested in was strategy and thinking about strategy. Because every budget, when I was in opposition, or when we came into administration, it just seems like death by 1,000 cuts. And I was thinking, are we here to build strong communities? Are we here to shape the places we represent? Or are we simply here to manage a limited set of services implemented under central government directives while surviving on a bare minimum of grants? Because that's what it's been feeling like to me for quite some time. So for me, the biggest part of the exec role and of all councillors is the longer term conversation and the longer term strategy so that we can build an area that's thriving for our residents. LGR did, to an extent, pull the rug from under my feet with that. And I'm not sure that LGR is the answer to that question. And I was also thinking it's so easy to accept the status quo. You know, when you become a councillor and you try and find your feet, and then on the exec, you know, it's so easy to accept the way things are. And one of those things we accept is that everything is so centralised. It's been centralised for a long time, which means that on a day-to-day basis, members and officers are often working with one hand tied behind their back, bound tightly by central government rules. And in fact, we are, by international standards, one of the most centralised democratic systems in the world. If we take planning, Bob's already mentioned planning, it's understandable that people might be worried about whether decisions are made in Watford or Stevenage or wherever. But in truth, central government really makes a lot of our decisions with regards to planning with its NPPF. It's the government decides if we're going to have a town built on our greenbelt or whether Mr. and Mrs. Jones indeed get their ambitious extension on the side of their house. Bin collections, that's been quite topical recently. You may have heard. Well, it was actually the Lib Dem Conservative coalition in 2014 that first really started issuing guidance to local councils on bin collection. So they've been meddling in that for a while. But really the most important part is funding. And I'm sure this is something that resonates with everyone. We cannot freely raise the revenue that we believe is right for our communities. It's not a deal between us and our election pledges and the voters at the ballot box. Council tax is capped, business rates are controlled. And instead, what we've got to do is rely on this labyrinth of really complicated grants that nobody really understands and takes our officers hours and hours and meetings in order to apply for these grants. At one point, there was even a grant for chewing gum removal. Don't know if anyone's aware of that. And that tells you, I think, everything you need to know about how overly managed the system has become and how overly centralised it's become. Now, I also know when I say this, and I've said things like this many times in this chamber, I do run the risk of sounding a bit idealistic, because the reality is the whole country is currently running at a deficit, and I'm aware that some of my frustrations bump up against the fiscal reality. I do know that. But the serious point does remain. Local government can't think strategically, long term, when we've got no certainty, no autonomy and no control. Successive governments of all colours have steadily pulled decision making away ever since the parties themselves, the local government themselves, became more and more party politically orientated. And so whatever you think, or whatever you hear from Whitehall, the rhetoric that the actual evidence overwhelmingly points in the other direction. So I think it's safe to say I am sceptical about LGR. But no, there is no but. No but. What I was going to finish and say, Eric, in terms of this evening and tonight's business, I know that some exec colleagues might want to set out why they prefer one model or another. I totally respect that. That's their choice to do it. All approaches are valid tonight. But personally, I'm here to listen, take it away, reflect on what's been said, and then form a decision before next week. And that's why when it's my turn to vote, I'm going to be abstaining tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Vicky and then David.
I find myself in the very rare situation where I actually agree with Councillor Deering. So I know that members of the opposition wanted to call this debate to try and feel like they had a say in what the council decides, but the council doesn't actually have much of a decision to make in terms of the process for local government reorganisation, because that's all going to be taken by government, probably with absolutely no recognition of the way that any of the 11 councils in Hertfordshire vote. I see this debate and all the person hours that have gone into devising the 3 different options still on the table as a complete waste of time. This is, of course, assuming that a decision has not already been taken to do something completely different to the remaining options. When LGR was announced as a consultation, rather than the reality of a Hobson's choice of a unitary or another unitary or a different unitary, very loose and confusing edicts were issued by government about how many residents were needed to be in each unitary to make it economically viable. Was it 500k? Was it over 350k? Was it a different number? But all of this is actually a knee-jerk reaction to pursue further cuts to council budgets, to subsidise central government to compensate for the massive blows to our economy, including Brexit and the quasi-budget. This removal of local democracy and concentration of the real power in the hands of a mayor is not designed to enfranchise, but to create large power blocks with less representation for residents. Now we are being told that the announcement of which unitary model will be summer 2026, leaving us with the unenviable task of setting up the elections and formats of either 2 or 3 or 4 unitaries in under a year, whereas with some proper planning by a competent government, we could have had 2 years to plan, prepare and spend time on the important job of enabling a seamless transition and providing a replacement to the councils that is better than the sum of its parts. If government had laid out exactly what they wanted initially, which, let's face it, is probably 2 unitaries, far less time could have been spent discussing the options with their myriad of permutations, as the only decision would have been where to draw the lines, horizontal, vertical or diagonal. I know that our superb East Herts officer team are already preparing for the advent of the unitaries, but there is only so much that can be done prior to knowing the shape of things to come. Sufficient implementation time should have been allowed to avoid the disasters that happened during the last period of massive change to local democracy around 50 years ago when East Herts came into being. As a member of the exec, I will be abstaining this evening. I have and will listen to what I think are pointless but probably passionate speeches and take them into consideration when I vote at exec. As while I don't believe there is any point in this council making a decision on which option we prefer, unlike the current government, I do believe that representative democracy is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. David, Eric, and then Chris.
Thank you very much, Chairman. A lot has been said, and a lot has been said, and I concur with much of it. I come from the position of it ain't broke, don't fix it currently, and I'm rather surprised that here we are with a Labour government which is repeating what they tried to do in 1997 when Johnny Prescott was sent out into the countryside to do exactly what they're trying to do now, and he failed miserably. It absolutely flatlined. Some of us have been in politics long enough to remember that. Having had the good fortune and the honour to serve up the hill for 16 years, it does cast for me some concern around one of the major benefits which is being hailed, which is saving of money. I don't know where these savings are going to come from, because Bob here for the last many years put together a balanced budget at the county, and it was a struggle. Hour by hour, it was a struggle. Every single service was and remains stressed. Those of you that are now there are just about to go into your first budget process. Good luck. I personally was in charge of the scrutiny of the budget for 8 years, 480 to 510 pages, line by line. It's really tough. The numbers are big, but the problems and the calls on that money are bigger. It's very challenging, and I'm not heartened when I see that this government is prepared. On the one hand, why it's saying we have to pick up those debts that are living currently within what will become the separate unitaries. On the one hand, they're saying there is no extra money. If you have the misfortune to go into a unitary with a council that's in a bad position, and I can only say God help anybody that goes into a unitary with Woking with £500 million worth of debt, then you're going to have to pick that up. But conveniently, Surrey, which is a problem that is so big, will actually be helped through their £1 billion deficit, because otherwise the whole thing will collapse. And you'll notice they're one of the early adopters. So there's all sorts of hypocrisies going on. There's nothing that's coming out of central government, and this is not truly. This is not a big P political thing for me. It's a small P political thing. It wouldn't really matter who was in Westminster. There's going to be a huge on the budget side as well. There's going to be a huge loss of scale when it comes to getting contracts. There's just been a huge renegotiation of the highways contract. It's taken years. It's drawn on decades of experience. That won't be there. It's gone. We're going to face, on additional to that, we're going to now have, as a result of this ill thought out imposition, we're now going to have 11 lame duck councils, or however long it takes for this to come out the other side and for the new councils to bed in. And for a mayor, heaven help us if that happens, to bed in. Lame ducks, minimum 2.5, 3 years, possibly 5 or 6. Tough, really tough. I'm not particularly impressed by the, it'll improve residents' engagement. 60+% don't engage in the political process at all. They don't vote. And a lot of those that do vote don't really have an interest in what we're doing if it doesn't directly affect them. We see them at planning meetings when it's their neighbour or the house over the road. We don't see them otherwise. They vote us in and let us get on with the job, and that's probably quite sensible. Your labyrinthine grants touches a key point. I do get that. I don't see how this is going to be resolved by having smaller, bigger authorities with a mayor over the top, because the mayor will get the money. Let's be clear. It's the mayor that's going to get the funding. And this particular government, I suspect, is of the view that they stand a good chance of getting a lot of mayors in over the top of these authorities. Good, bad, or indifferent, but that's where the money is going to go. I'm a bit of a Luddite, I admit it up front. I don't potentially like change for change's sake, and I think this is what this is rapidly becoming. And I can see very little, Chairman, which I can go back to my residents, and this is the real point, go back to my residents and say, and I'm being asked now, people are picking up on it. This is why we're doing it. This is a good idea. This is the outcome that we hope to achieve. I can't see any of that in a way that I can express it to my residents, which is going to make a difference to them and their families in the next 15, 20, 25 years. I see 5 years of complete chaos. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Again, touching on the 5 minutes. Eric?
Thank you, Chairman. I think, like many people here, I don't think we should be going through this at this time. I think it is important to debate this, regardless of how or who makes the decision, because residents need to hear the various views of this 50-member council. And of course, the government may decide something completely different to these options. We know that. I understand a mayoral authority has been requested for Hertfordshire. They may come back and say, I tell you what, we'll have one council and a mayor for the whole of Hertfordshire. I'm torn. Given the options we have this evening, I'm torn. It's a shame that members of the executive are abstaining. I think the public would have liked to have heard that as part of the debate, but that's up to you. That's your prerogative. So I just want to talk about some of the complexities of breaking up what we have now. And as we've heard, 80% of the services and costs currently sit with county. So any breakup could potentially involve duplication, of course, because then you'll need 2, 3, or 4 heads of service and executives for social care, for example. And there are already many shared services or joint contracts across Hertfordshire. I'll give some examples: building control, home improvements agency, some materials recycling contracts, also many shared services across social care. Many services are too complex or specialist or too small to break up. Waste services have multiple recently agreed contracts, both insourced and outsourced, 16 recycling centres, 2 transfer stations, 4 energy from waste contracts. Trying to allocate those across without having a shared service will be very difficult. As was mentioned, the new highways contract has only just started. It's a 1.95 billion contract for the next minimum of 7 years. So the net result may be that regardless of what's decided in the end, a number of shared services may be retained regardless of the number of unitaries that we have. Otherwise, economies of scale and purchasing power will be reduced. And in some services, we could be competing for a limited pool of staff. And also the question of savings that we've had presented to us. These have been done very quickly. Of course, what's been presented is the greater number of councils, the fewer the savings, or they'll take longer to achieve. Council tax across the options will vary as levels of deprivation and social care are not equal across county. The less viable authorities may still require contributions from those that are more viable, or government will move funding, a bit like the fair funding formula, between Hertfordshire councils. County councils are already subsidising the government with high needs. We don't get enough funding for that. The dedicated schools grant doesn't cover the cost of demand. That debt will be taken on by the new unitaries. This financial year, the interest for the borrowing of that is £2 million, and that will grow over the coming years because the money isn't coming in from government. The cost of transformation will also be picked up by the councils, not the government. So there'll be a further significant interest charge on the 100 to 150 million borrowing in paying back loans, which will impact revenue, however number of councils we have. I'm nearly finished. On the other hand, for local residents, a two-council authority may be just as remote as a single council. For the two-council option with nearly 117 councillors, there's a real danger local interest may be ignored by the wider body of members. For example, think community governance. Do we think the interests of our towns and parishes will be given the same weight in the two unitary option covering 2/3 of the geography of the county and with 117 councillors? All of the cost estimates in all the scenarios are speculative.
Yeah.
The reality depends on for social care, which is 75% of the current county budget, and even within year can jump dramatically. So predicting 10 years is impossible. The estates, the buildings and housing stock are not taken into account in the calculations. From an economic perspective, I think don't break up the county or as little as possible. The Democrat in me favours a unitary with which residents can identify. So I'm going to say now, I will reluctantly, very reluctantly opt for the 4 option. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. You've timed your speech again. 5 minutes. No. David, your microphone's on, by the way. So I've got Chris, Diane, and then Angus. Thank you. Chris again. Yeah.
Thankfully, I'm not going to take up 5 minutes. I'm actually going to be obviously agreeing with Bob because obviously what he said makes complete sense. So there is no purpose whatsoever to reorganize something that is working fairly efficiently. And as Eric has pointed out, we're going to save no money whatsoever when we try and split up shared services. And then we have all the difficulty with demographic issues about some areas having higher demand than others. Broxbourne has a much higher demand for adult social care than, say, St Albans might have. So the overall monetary benefit will be zero. If not, it will cost money. It's very difficult to see what the advantages are, and I find it difficult as a representative of a local population. We don't have a bigger voice in saying what is right for our area, and if we did have a voice, it would be ignored. So I mean, I also think I would be opting for an option that gave as much local representation as possible. Although I can see there being all sorts of complications in trying to work out how shared services are allocated across the different now unitary authorities. To me, it's a, yeah, if it's not broken, why are we trying to fix it? Exactly that.
Thank you, Chris. Diane?
Thank you, Chair. I too don't want to go on at great length. I think there's been some very informative points made here this evening. And I do hope the executive, who've got the role to complete to see which way we're going to go, will take them on board. I appreciate you don't want to vote this evening, but a lot of the comments that have been made make total sense, not only for us as a responsible authority, but also on behalf of our residents. This is what we're here to do, to ensure our residents get best value for money. Reference is made earlier to the former Urban District Council, which is now what we are here as East Herts District Council. That, for those of us that may or may not remember, was a total nightmare. Mistakes were made, money was lost, the residents had their taxes put up as a result of inefficient management done by that then authority. And so East Herts was born. And over the years, we've done a pretty good job, I think, in many ways. But that's not what we're here tonight to debate. We have to decide what we want. So I would recommend that whatever we do, bearing in mind the former mistakes made, that this authority protects its assets before any mergers are planned. And this was one of the mistakes that was made many, many years ago with the Urban District Council. So I would flag that up with the executive to bear that in mind, because this authority has some very good assets and we need to protect that. Whichever way forward you decide we're going to go, 2, 3 or 4, we need to protect the assets. I would also flag up the issue that, you know, we're here for our residents and that's what we should be concentrating on as well. We want the best value for money. Also, we want them to be able to contact the new councillors. If we become too big and too remote, my fear is that many residents will feel that they can't approach whoever is going to be running that particular authority. And we become more remote, and the residents will feel isolated and want to talk to somebody, but might feel that if we're too remote, they can't do it. So it's a bit of a, it's not political, it's personal. And I feel we should be thinking about how they are going to contact the new authority to talk to somebody who understands where they're living, that they are experiencing a problem. So again, I would like to flag that with you, that you please consider that in your deliberations. And yeah, I think too big, residents will feel isolated, and please bear in mind what I've just said. Thank you.
Points of order, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
Just, it's been said a couple of times that the executive is going to decide the way we're going to go. And I just think if someone's listening to this, they may interpret that as the exec decides what happens in this local area. I was wondering if James could just clarify exactly what the exec vote will mean next week.
Yeah, I think it was said right at the very outset by Councillor Crystal that the final decision lies with the government. However, the executive is next week on Tuesday will be setting out the preferred option of East Herts District Councillors on a way forward.
Yeah, I understand it. If someone was listening to what's being said and they hadn't heard that, they might not quite understand. So I'm not telling you, I'm telling people that might be listening.
Alex, is it a point of order?
I'm not sure. It's a question really, because I'm not aware of the history. But when you say, Councillor Holborn, protect the assets, what do you mean? Which way are you talking about? Do you mean protect them by devolving them down or devolving them up?
Yeah, very quickly, yes. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, I appreciate what you're saying. There are assets that do need to be looked at, and I'm thinking about the future and long-term protection before any form of merger goes ahead. Those assets are known to the officers, obviously buildings and parks and other things. All that has to be taken into the equation of the merger, because what happened under the old former authority, which is now EHDC, mistakes were made and certain assets that were around became very difficult to decide who owned it anymore. And that particularly happened in Bishop Stortford and indeed other areas. So all I'm saying is just take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Angus.
Thank you, Chairman. I unfortunately will be holding forth slightly and using my full 5 minutes. And I start with the also slightly odd position of agreeing with Councillor Glover Ward on some of the points that she made. I think this whole process began as a pet project for the former Secretary of State. It was pushed forward at pace with politics taking priority over practicalities. If this was genuinely a bottom-up reorganisation with communities at its heart, MHCLG would follow the consensus of local councils rather than asking for all this work to be undertaken and then potentially taking a different decision under the imposition of ministers. Along with colleagues, I remain sceptical about LGR as a process, but if we must express a preference, which I think we have to, we should do so in a way that protects residents, financial fairness, and our sense of place. My concerns on this centre on 3 core issues. First, on local identity. Our strength is the diversity of our area. So our market towns, our parishes, our rural villages, and the communities that have very strong identities. I think any change to local government must reinforce that, not erase it. And a major criticism of the current system that we have is that residents often don't know who is responsible for what. And I understand that there is an argument to be made for the simplification. But part of that is that they feel decisions are made far away by people that they don't know and they don't see and who don't understand their local area. The 2 and 3 unitary models make that problem significantly worse. They create these huge artificial geographies that residents have little kind of connection to, and areas that people don't travel through or recognise in a way that they might currently do. In the 2 unitary models especially, you could end up with hundreds of councillors representing thousands of residents across huge geographical areas in a super council that basically starts to resemble something like the Communist Party of China. It's this sort of mad chamber of hundreds and hundreds of people. There's a question of consistency, I think, for members here tonight. on two recent examples. One is when we were going through community governance review, councillors argued that smaller electorates increase local accountability and democratic connection. If that principle mattered then when we're talking about town level, surely that matters even more when we're talking about redrawing an entire county. By that logic, the 4 unitary model is the only model that maintains meaningful accountability, with councils rooted in recognisable places and where councillors are more visible to their and accessible to their residents. Similarly, at the last school council meeting, when we were talking about members' allowances, we were all highlighting the potential barriers for people putting themselves forward to be councillors. Now, if you've suddenly got to travel halfway across a county to get to a council meeting, that has got to be considered a significant barrier. I mean, it's, you know, for those of us on the eastern side of Hertfordshire, Hertford's quite far enough of an evening when you're racing back from work or you've done childcare responsibilities. If you're travelling much, much further to those meetings, that's got to be a barrier for people. My second point is just around the kind of the clarity and the experience for residents. I think they've got to feel that connection to whatever council ends up coming forward. And I think on that basis, the sort of 4 unitary model is the best way forward, because it makes everything closer together. The forward projections of population in the pack for all the way to 2045 actually means that the under the 4 unitary model, that each one ends up being quite similar in size, and so you end up with a kind of a more fairness. I'm conscious that I'm on about a minute and a half left. I've got a timer running just so I don't run over. So the final point is a really important one that I don't think has been made enough, and this is about the impact on residents from a financial perspective. There's so much in the document, in the spine document, around the finances of councils, but we don't talk about, or no one is really talking about, the impact on our residents. The truth is that under certain models, particularly under the 2 unitary model, council tax harmonisation would see our residents' council tax go up by 20% in the first year. And I don't think anyone has levelled with residents and said that in a really clear way. And they need to hear that, because that is a huge jump. And I don't think anyone's aware of that risk. So on that basis, for me, the 4 unitary model is certainly the better option. I think as well, there's a lot more I can go into in terms of some of the risks associated with finances at a council level, that if something goes wrong in a 2 unitary model in one part of that unitary, there is a much greater impact on a larger population in a larger area than there would be in a smaller system. So look, tonight's vote is indicative, I get that, but it still matters, because it matters what we're signalling as a council to the communities we represent. And I think being honest about those risks and those costs specifically for residents is really, really important. So I remain sceptical of the whole thing in terms of reorganisation generally, but if we have to choose, I think it has to be done on the basis of what protects those local identities, avoids that huge council tax shock, and preserves democratic accountability. And to my mind, that's the 4 unitary option. And I'm minded to vote for that this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. Chris Wilson.
It was a dramatic start, wasn't it? Thank you, Chair. I think I might start with 2 surprising things. One, that I do largely agree with Councillor Deering and most members opposite. The second thing is that I might actually please Councillor Deering somewhat, because I will be saying which option I prefer. Not all the executive are doing the same thing. So I wanted to start by reiterating my thanks to residents who I met in the 5 towns during my engagement sessions about this issue, and hopefully it's not, like many of us think, entirely pointless. And also, what I should have done last time I spoke about this is thank the officers who joined me, who were excellent and also very helpful. The conversations have definitely increased the depth of my understanding and thoughts on the issue. But I do think what we have here is an imposition of how local councils will be arranged. We're very constrained with regards to what new council structures can look like and what services each tier deals with. We've not had any opportunity to consider giving more statutory powers to local town and parish councils, which we might wish to do. We've not had the chance, realistically, to redraw the maps of 1974 and replace them with councils and boundaries that actually reflect the real patterns of travel, work and behaviour amongst our residents. So in Stortford and Sawbridgeworth, for me, the links are with Harlow, Stansted, Cambridge and even London, as well as surrounding villages. They're not with Hertford, Welling and Stevenage. This could be an opportunity to actually redraw the boundaries properly in reflecting what people actually do and think about our residents. That's better for our residents. There's talk in the papers about health authorities being aligned with the new proposed unitaries, but we all know in those areas of the district that we go to Harlow for hospital. So that also seems to me not being mentioned isn't great. In addition, our important transport links would be controlled by different new unitaries. So our links are M11 and the railway line down the M11 corridor. We weren't given the chance to decide if we wanted this change or not, as someone else said before. In more rural areas, unitaries aren't as easy to run as in cities, where there's an obvious discrete area to govern. So we are drawing boundaries, we're just sort of making up. A very wise man said to me recently, and he's sitting very close to me, Councillor Horner, that the services district councils run are most easily run by areas the size of districts, whilst the services county councils run are most easily run by areas the size of counties. So why we're changing it? Surrey's proposals, of course, have been looked at by the government and ignored. So we've got a big challenge ahead, but we do need to make the best of this, and I'm trying not to be entirely negative. There are some benefits that can be realised. I'm particularly looking at the papers and seeing what the public thought could be the most, the biggest benefit, and it is more joined up services that work better together. We definitely know from ourselves and from the experience of residents that we do have a problem with communication at times between councils and with residents knowing which council to go to. There is therefore some sort of opportunity here. Before stating which, no, hold on, I'll scrap that 1 second. It's also the case much easier to run a council that's financially viable and most set up for the future. And although I accept the indications in the papers are rather vague and not definite, it's the best we have. So that has to play a part. Again, speaking parochially for Stortford, I think it's important to have most local solution possible, because the centre of gravity of an authority for a town on the periphery is going to be much further away for a 3 or a 4 unitary. This is not important because of some sort of bias which we often hear from residents. I don't believe that, but it's more that if you have a project to deliver and there's loads and loads of towns very close to that project that can all benefit from it, you're likely to go for that project and not the project that helps the towns and villages on the periphery. But having said that, I feel the financial outlook does look bleak for the 4 council area option, and even more so if the boundary change is proposed to make it more viable and not allowed through. So I'm going to be voting for the 3 council area, but I am listening, and I'm very open to change, and it might even change today by the time from now until the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Tim, and then, yep, there's quite a few people here, but Tim first, and I will pick up with Yvonne.
Thanks, Chair. Spoiler alert, I'm abstaining. So just to remove the tension before we set off. The other thing I think we can offer as reassurance, I don't think we're going to be twinned with Woking, but that's out of our hands. But that's maybe. I think on a more serious level, I feel not angry, but I feel really confused as to why we're faced with this decision to make when there is this air of, as Vicky said, this air of democratic intervention. But actually, it looks very, very like it's going to be decided and will be decided outside of this chamber and outside of the role of Hertfordshire itself. So that's not a great basis. My background's engineering, so I'm sort of into solutions, and I'm looking at 2 parish councils which I attend on a regular basis, and it really strikes me that that's where the engine room is going to be for local democracy. Our town councils, our parish councils, we need whatever the outcome of this, and there will be an outcome. It will come. I doubt very much whether we'll stop this in its tracks. There will be an outcome, and we will have to make it work for it to be successful. And I think it's going to place a massive onus on whoever's in the new unitary authority to fight for this budget, which goes to mayors. I think we've got to be absolutely aware of the benefits and strive to get those benefits landed, minimise the disadvantages, but it will all be about practical implementation in the end, because I fancy we're just heading in one direction, and that will be one of the disseminations of this disaggregation of Herts County. That saddens me, because I recognise with Eric some of the powerful things that can be done in one place on behalf of lots of people. But I guess we just need to spin it round and be able to deliver on behalf of our residents solidly, as Diane was saying. They need to get value for money out of this, whatever shape it looks like, and feel that their linkage to democracy and decision making is at least as strong as it is now, if not better, if we can make that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Just order of hands up. I've got Yvonne, Rachel, Nick and Miriam. Oh, okay then. Alex and Carl. 1 second. So Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the principle, I'm coming at this in a slightly different way because my whole career was in local government. The fact is that there are obstacles between district councils and the county council. It's often awkward, and as district councillors, we often feel like we just can't get through to the county council services. I think in principle this is about strategy, coordination, and public service efficiency. I also think, I agree, it's about identity, geographic identity, and I agree it's to do with how we relate to the places around us, the places that we do relate to. At the moment, East Herts is a little bit anomalous because we've got big towns which kind of we're right on the edge of our boundary, and we are very related to Harlow, for example. I've worked in 2 unitary authorities. It's just remarkable how officers from different departments, whether it's education or transport or planning, whatever, economic development, they are able to talk to each other, have meetings together, and have a geographic identity at the same time. And I think that the unitary way of organizing things is most telling at director level. You have chief executive and directors who are across all of these strategy and services, able to sit down together and talk about these things. That seems to be a strong point. There was another authority that I worked for which had an arrangement. I worked for a district council which had an arrangement with the county council to move to, as it were, devolve some of its transport and highway services into the district so that they were there on the ground. The other part of the organization, looking at this, is the way that local authorities cooperate strategically. I've got in mind a term, it may be out of date now, but planning the duty to cooperate, which is a bit of a game. It was a bit of a game. But the idea is that local authorities work together across boundaries and try and work out strategies. That's easier with the unitary authority. But I favour the four unitary approach because for our area, it makes geographic sense. We know that the towns, we relate to the towns that would be in that area, the countryside that gives the towns their character and their economic significance. There would be a kind of understanding of that area. But a little bit more important than that is that the unitary that would be part of has a massive long boundary with Essex, and it's across that boundary that we have very meaningful relationships. And if we were any bigger than 1/4 of the county, that would be more difficult. We will still be having to make these strategic relationships with Harlow and Towns and Uttlesford and Epping. So I think there's a principle. There are difficulties with this, but there's a principle that makes complete sense in terms of cooperation and efficiencies and directorship, and the 4 model approach is much better. It is the best for East Herts.
Thank you, Yvonne. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I agree with a lot of the points which have been raised on all sides so far. There's going to be a huge amount of pain and reorganisation over quite a lot of years, but there are also some opportunities to make councils a little bit more understandable to residents, and whenever there's change, there's always opportunity. So I think we need to take that. I think it is disappointing that the proposals were put forward at the same time as this idea of the strategic authority, but we've got the government hasn't provided any recent information on deadlines and so on for a strategic authority, and it's difficult to make this decision in isolation of that when we don't know who's going to be doing that strategic planning. So I think that's something that the government should be clarifying. Are we going to have one or not? And so that makes a huge difference to how those overarching services are deployed. In terms of having to make a decision about which model we should take, so I think fairness is an important thing. If you look at the 2 unitary model, that would leave the eastern side with higher levels of deprivation and a lower tax base. And although it would mean perhaps less disruption to those county-wide services, I think the 3 unitary authority offer is a better one. In terms of having unitary authorities of a decent size and being fair and balanced across the different authorities. So that would be my option.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Nick?
Thank you, Chair. So this is one of those rare debates where everybody seems to be agreeing with everybody else. We should do it more often. We're here tonight to consider a proposal dressed up as local government reorganisation. We're told that Hertfordshire's current 2-tier system will be replaced with a single structure. But look closely. The County Council of 78 elected members disappears, only to be replaced by a mayoral strategic authority with 1 directly elected figure, holding the reins over policing, fire and rescue, transport, skills, spatial planning and infrastructure. 1 person controlling the major strategic services for this county. Then we are offered up to 4 unitary councils to take on everything else: education, social care, highways, housing, planning and waste. And the number of elected councillors? Less than half of what we have now. Fewer voices, fewer advocates, fewer people standing up for residents. And for what? The 2-tier system still survives, just wearing different clothes. This isn't reorganisation, it's a coup against local democracy delivered with a smile and a flowchart. Even worse, the plan creates the duplication that it is supposed to prevent and forces costs up. Today we have a single county director for children's services, a single director for adult care. Under these proposals, every new unitary will need their own directors at the same moment as other councils are restructuring. We will be fighting for the same limited pool of experienced people, driving salaries up and accountability down. More CEOs, bigger pay packets, poorer services and higher bills, all in the name of efficiency. We are asked to choose between 2, 3 or 4 unitaries. That's like asking the passengers to vote on the band's encore as the Titanic is already sinking. There is a credible alternative, a single county-wide unitary without a mayor, with as much power as possible devolved to the level which actually connects with our residents, our towns and parishes. They're embedded in our communities, they know our residents, they hear concerns firsthand, and yet they're constantly sidelined by the higher levels of government. Give those councils the seats at the top table. Allow the chairs of every town and parish council to sit on the unitary authority, voting in proportion to the size of the community they represent. An electoral college rooted in real neighbourhoods, not remote bureaucracy. It would cut out an entire tier of elections, and most importantly, it would give power to the people who have been ignored for far too long. Colleagues, democracy works best when it is close to the people it serves. These proposals take it further away. We should reject them and demand a system that gives Hertfordshire back to its communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Miriam.
Thank you. I'm not going to speak for long because I'm not trying to overthrow any political system that we have to deal with. To my way of thinking, we're here to actually decide between the choices that we're faced with. I agree completely that it's not making things more democratic, but it is what it is. From my way of thinking, I believe that the 2 unitary model is better because I'm concerned about the impact on our most vulnerable residents, be they children or adults requiring social care. I think the 4 model in particular is very messy. I don't think it's going to be such a mess cutting all those things up and reorganising it. To me, that's, you know, to do that in the name of democracy, I don't think that's going to help things at all. With the balance between the different unitaries, I think in the 3 unitary model, central, I think 3 and 4, the central unitary is going to be struggling financially and would need support. So to my way of thinking, the 2 unitaries give more balanced communities, and I think it makes it much easier and more straightforward to continue with the major services that our residents really need. Yeah, I genuinely don't think there's going to be a huge difference in the level of democracy delivered between the 2, 3 and 4. So I'll be going for the 2.
Thank you, Miriam. Alex?
Thank you. I wanted to talk a bit about how good it could be. I went to Wildeshausen in Germany in the summer, and I was really impressed with the quality of the civic space there. And in Wildeshausen, it's a town that's a bit smaller than Hertford. They have double the number of staff that we have at East Herts to run the town, and they run services like they look after schools. Services like teachers are run on a professional level nationally. And it seems to me that unfortunately the Labour and the Conservative Party over the years have made mistakes, have made the wrong choices. And because of austerity, 40% cut in funding to local services, we are now forced down this dog's dinner route of these options before us. I'm not happy with any of them, but I will be voting for 3 because it seems to be the best of a very bad choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Carl?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm pretty much in agreement with many others in the chamber today that I don't believe that local government reform is necessarily going to be helpful. It's going to be a huge undertaking. It's going to cost a lot of money and cause a lot of disruption. But having said that, we are where we are, and as councillors, it's our duty to do the best we can in the circumstances that we face. So we obviously have to look at the information we got, and obviously it was a huge amount of information there. And I don't know about anybody else, but I felt it was actually too overwhelming. There's no way you can digest all that information and actually make a reasonable decision. I actually found all 3 of the submissions to be very plausible. You read them and think, yeah, that sounds great, and I thought that with all of them. But the problem is, you can't have 3 winners. You can only have 1 winner. So it left me in a bit of a kind of logical dilemma because, if they could obviously all be equally good. In which case, why are we wasting all our time debating? Because it doesn't really matter what we get. It's all going to be the same. But more likely is that one is better than the other, and therefore, at least 2 of the reports that we read today are misleading because they're saying they're the best when they're clearly not the best. So I thought what I need to do with this is find more evidence. So I kind of, because I didn't want to make a decision on misleading information. So I kind of went looking on the internet to look for previous examples of where unitary councils have been formed to try and get some feeling for what we should be considering. There was a report which was really interesting, which was done by Grant Thornton in 2024, and that basically looked at all the learnings from previous local government reorganisations into unitaries, and I'd recommend anyone that's interested to read that, because it kind of goes through all the learnings from previous implementations. And the big takeaway from me from that report was that, you know, it always seems to be underestimated how much resources you need to actually implement a you know, reorganisation like this. So it's probably going to cost a lot more than everybody thinks it's going to cost. But that report didn't actually look at an individual case. It was more of a generalisation, but I did find one in Somerset. So in 2020, there was a report which was a business case showing that by creating a single unitary council in Somerset from 4 separate districts and the county, they could make savings of 53 million within the first 5 years. The report as supplied was about 168 pages long and actually looked very much like what we've presented with today. It's remarkably similar. And it, again, contains so much detail, every detail you'd need to know. The headline figures that would be a kind of a net cost in the first 2 years, and then in year 3, savings will be 16 million, 34 million in year 4, 53 million in year 5. Very much like what we've seen in the reports today. So Somerset decided to go ahead with their unitary in 2021, and it was implemented in 2023. By November 2023, though Somerset Council declared a financial emergency. They had a £100 million shortfall. A lot of this, admittedly, was down to increases in demand for social care. And so the government bailed them out by allowing them to sell assets and use the money from assets to support the revenue budget. What I also found is that in June 2024, their scrutiny committee studied the benefits of LGR, and there's a table on there which shows that the maximum savings achievable from LGR were just 20.9 million, which made me wonder where the 32 million savings had gone missing from the original estimate. I didn't have time to find that out. In late 2024, there was a CIPFA review which reported it is acknowledged that the process of merging 5 authorities into a single unitary authority, together with associated management challenges, is very significant. Indeed, these issues have contributed to the financial difficulties of the council's journey so far. So basically it's saying that actually doing the reorganisation was a symptom of the problems. In February 2025, the government provided another £63 million of the support to Somerset. And in 25-26, they had to increase council tax by 7.5%, obviously, which is not good for the residents. Despite all this extra support and the increase in council tax, in October 2025, a Conservative Somerset councillor described the council's finances as more red lights flashing than a red light district. I did wonder how he knew how many red lights there are in a red light district. We won't go there. The budget gap for 26-27 is 101 million. Okay, so basically the population of Somerset is 571,000, which is very similar to some of the numbers being done here. So I just wanted to say that it's population size and everything, and when we're looking at the reports, don't pay too much attention to the numbers, because in Somerset they turned out to be illusions, and we should vote for what we think is right for residents.
Thank you, Carl. Aubrey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fortunate enough to represent 6 parishes covering a total of 16 villages and hamlets, from thriving rural communities to small clusters of homes that most people would pass in a few moments. But all of these places are filled with people who care deeply about where they live, and as such, I wanted to share some of those rural concerns with this local government reform. These are communities where parish meetings are still held in village halls or parish churches, where neighbours really do look out for one another, and where local councillors are known by name. People here rightly expect their voice to be heard. That is why I am deeply concerned that under the proposals for larger unitary authorities, these rural voices the voices of our small villages and hamlets risk being lost. In vast centralised councils dominated by towns, it is inevitable that decisions will be shaped by urban priorities, issues that matter most to rural residents, access to public transport, the conditions of country roads, support for local village schools, maintaining community spaces, and those small planning applications that really do shape village life would struggle to compete for attention. In short, local representation would become distant, diluted, and detached. The current system, as imperfect as it may be, works because it balances strong local knowledge with the ability to deliver county-wide services. Local councillors understand the character of their parishes. They know what matters on the ground. That closeness would be lost if these decisions were moved miles away to an unfamiliar town in a large new unitary authority. So if we are to have reorganisation, and I wish we were not, like many others have shared, then I say with reluctance that the 4 unitary model is the only one that even begins to preserve some of that meaningful representation for local communities. Smaller unitaries would give our residents a stronger voice, keeping decision making somewhat local, accessible and accountable. So if change is coming, we must choose a model that keeps local democracy alive and ensure our communities are not left behind. And for me, and for many of the rural residents that I represent, that means supporting the pure unitary option, not because we welcome reorganisation, but because it offers the best chance to preserve the truly local voice our residents deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Aubrey. I have 2 more, Calvin and Nathan, in that order.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Estop has already made reference to the work that she did in a local, a unitary authority, and I think I probably have the distinction of being the only member here this evening who's actually been a councillor in a unitary authority. That unitary authority being in Southampton when I lived there. And from a resident's perspective, I think it worked well. It meant that there was only one council. There was quite clear levels of accountability and responsibility. From the council's point of view, it also meant that services could be joined up and that they could influence things across the whole city, whether that was linking up housing and social care, matters of that sort. But what we have to remember is that Southampton is very different to Hertfordshire. What we have to remember, this is where the but comes in that you were looking for earlier, Eric, I think, because Southampton is a relatively small city. It's a compact city. It has an identity as a city. So having one council to represent that city and having one identity is very different to having a council that is representing many small villages, many towns, as we've heard. And so I quite rightly said to Chris that, in my view, when it comes to an area like Hertfordshire, it is best the large services are at a county level and the local services at a district or at a very local level. But I don't see any of the 3 models that we have before us will really help to bring about councils that reflect local identity. Whilst we might think that 4 unitary authorities will be the closest to that, it is still a long way from that. I think the model that would best serve the people in this area, best serve the people of England, is one that has been referred to by Councillor Dar, that where there are very strong local town and parish councils, and was also referred to perhaps idealistically by Councillor Cox. So my view when we're looking at these different models is that the one that preserves the situation where we have strong services and we have financially viable services is the two unitary authority model, but it has to be backed up by giving much more authority, much more weight and much more responsibility to local councils. It has to be backed up by the pillars, I think, that are placed in the if you read the spine document. They do now, that depends on future future political decision making, and we can't guarantee what that decision making is going to be. But I do believe that that is probably the best and the closest model that we have going forward. Although we will all have different views, and there isn't. I don't think there is a right and a wrong answer here, because like most of the people who have spoken this evening, I wouldn't be going forward with this. This is the imposition of a one-size-fits-all model on the whole country, something that is perhaps may be suited to our big cities, but isn't suited to our shire counties. But I think within the circumstances that we have, I will be supporting the two unitary authority model. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Calvin. Nathan.
Nahum, rather than
Okay,
Nathan.
yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And I've thank you to everyone who's contributed. I've been listening closely, and I don't disagree with what everyone has said. I think I do take a slightly more optimistic view on it. That there are benefits which I think people who've worked with different councils have acknowledged in the simplicity of unitary authorities. I do get quite a lot of requests that I have to pass on to county councillors, or who I have to then raise with county council. And similarly the other way, I do have town councillors come to me as well. But there is confusion in the system at the moment, and we are, I think, to a person, slightly unusual in how much interest we take in local government, how much we understand about it. That is not true of everyone, and I do think there are benefits here. That said, I completely agree. I think we, society, people are very good at underestimating short-term costs, and things always end up being more disruptive, more expensive than predicted. But I think we also underestimate long-term gains. I remember, was it Crossrail was hugely over budget and was a complete nightmare, and successive governments were messing up all over the place. And now I go into London and I travel on the Elizabeth line, and it's amazing. And the benefits of that, I don't think, were predicted as well. Locally, we have projects we run locally that are over budget, maybe don't quite go as well in their first few weeks as we would like, but the benefits over time, really do start adding up. So perhaps I'm more hopeful than some people here. I do also think that this is a decision that will last for decades, probably, hopefully. This kind of reorganization doesn't happen very often, and it's in that context that I am kind of looking when I think about, what is the best option going forwards. Tonight I'm a consultee for a consultee, but I think it is still important that we think about this, and that we do our best to try and say, what is going to be best for the people who elected us. And for me, the option I think is best is the 4 unitary option. Joe, you were talking about kind of strategy. I think the east of Hertfordshire, well, as opposed to East Herts, is slightly unique within Hertfordshire. We are more rural on the whole. We don't have as larger cities. Well, we don't have any large cities like the rest. We have market towns, we have villages, and I do worry that the larger unitary options mean that there are pressures there that are perhaps not quite such a good fit for the character of East Hertfordshire, where the smaller authority there does give us the ability to have a strategy that fits for an area that is slightly distinct to the rest of Hertfordshire. I don't know if that persuades you either way there. The other point that I think was mentioned was the financial sustainability of it, and it is hard to predict these things. But again, this is a decision that is going to last for hopefully decades, and so having a model that can accommodate the growth that we expect to see in the population over the next 20, 30 years, I think is important too. That population is only going to go up. I noted that the predictions were that it's increasing by about double here than it is in north east Herts. The 4 unitary model to me gives more space for that growth without it becoming, this, I can't remember who it was talking about, a communist massive, like, clearly that would never happen, but there is, it has the space for that growth. And so for the reasons of, local democracy, room for growth in the future, and reflecting local character, for me, the 4 unitary authority is the one to go for.
Thank you, Naim. And I do apologise. And just to let you know, when people get my name wrong, they usually call me Adam. So
you are far from the first.
So Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I align myself with Bob Deering, who've put a good case across. And just for the record, I completely agree with Vicky Glover-Ward and what she said. Councillor Andrews was on about savings and there's going to be chaos for 5 years. I think that's a bit short-sighted, to be quite honest, because experience with joint service contracts has demonstrated to us over the years that it just doesn't work. Initially, there's different IT systems, then people just don't sort of gel together. But and today we hear about the Police and Crime Commission has been abolished, and they're going to go across to mayors or councils. So I think this government's got plans that we aren't aware of, and this is just a stepping stone, the first rung or second rung on a ladder that's going to take us, I really don't know well. But just for everybody's, on Monday the 21st of July, I wrote a letter to the Right Honourable Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government for a proposal for a progressive unitary authority. And this is, Councillor Wilson touched upon it earlier. And to me, we here in East Herts have got more in common with Harlow, Uttlesford, Broxbourne and Epping Forest, and they are all part of the innovation corridor. In Uttlesford, we've got Stansted Airport. We get the ripple effect of the challenges of traffic, the surface access to the airport. We accommodate all the air crews that come in. There's all sorts of challenges that we have, but the reality is, because the airport is in Essex, Uttlesford and Essex County Council get all the Section 106, and I think we are the poor sort of cousin. Currently, it's 30 million passengers per annum, and that's going to increase to 51 million passengers in the foreseeable future. So I think that, and the economy in the innovation corridor currently stands at £189 billion, and it's projected to increase to £350 billion by 2040. So Harlow and East Herts and Epping Forest, there's what currently 23,000 houses going to be sort of built in that area. Just across the border from Bishop Stortford and Sawbridgeworth, there's a big expansion of the airport and housing development, warehouses, etc., etc. So I think what I'm saying here is that the government hasn't taken a step back to actually look what is best for certain areas. They've just taken the boundary lines of the counties and said split, split, split. But the world's moved on from 1972 when all this was put in place. And you're quite right, Joseph, about what you were saying, you know, money, etc., coming in. What is it that we are here for? What are we doing for our communities, etc.? Our communities are changing, the demographics, etc., and it just doesn't fit in with any 2, 3, or 4 of the choices that we've been given this evening. It's a bit like an adult, a parent giving a child a choice of wallpapers to put in the bedroom and paint. Parent says, you can choose any wallpaper you want and any paint you want, then presents that child with 3 papers that can go into the room and 2 or 3 choices of paint. So, and the child feels really great because being given the choice and I've made the decision. But the reality is the decision's been made for us, and what's happening here this evening is really a token gesture. Whilst we're hearing our views, which is good, but we are just being led down the garden path. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham. I think we're getting towards the end here. Sarah, and unless there's any, Joe, Sarah and Joe, and then we'll go back to Hermione. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's been really useful discussion tonight. Just listening, I picked up a number of key themes which I thought was worth going over again. I think none of us are sat here thinking this is a great idea and we can't wait to get going. Obviously, we'll do our best to support the residents around here, but this wouldn't be a path that we'd have chosen to go down. On a positive side, I think everybody's also said that it's really good that people will know which council to go to now, because there won't be this confusion between county and district. I suppose some more negative notes and things we have to look at, money being one of them. I don't think anybody believes this is going to be this immediate cost saving bonanza that we're going to get, and actually it's going to cost a lot of money. Whatever decision we make, whichever path we go down. So when making my decision, I have sat there and thought, well, from a monetary side of things, how is that going to play out? And obviously you have to spend more money if you're, splitting up services, particularly big services. So you have to pay for setting up new services that cover all those different options, particularly social care. You can lose economies of scale from that, or you can end up having to break up joint contracts. I'm just hoping we've got some good change of control clauses in our contracts to be able to do that. So to me, that does seem like it's going to end up being more costly having more unitaries than it would be to just have the 2. But then the other thing that's come out is like loss of representation. Obviously, people feeling that if you have bigger unitaries, then you might lose representation more than if you have the smaller ones. But let's be honest, we're going to lose quite a number of councillors whichever direction we go in, and I don't feel there's much between those 2. Also, we talked about the barrier for being a councillor, and I think whichever option, this will be a big one. Being a unitary, there will be a daytime council aspect. I know that a number of us sitting here won't be able to go in the daytime, so I think you will lose a lot of working people because of that, and obviously you have to lose some of us because there are going to be less councillors, and so people will be less represented. I mean, I think a key to that is thinking about town council's roles, which don't really get touched on at all in these papers. And also there was the discussion about protecting assets. Again, I think we could think about how we can work with the town councils on that, whether we are thinking about selling assets to them or other methods. And I think that was a really good point about protecting assets. So I think the bottom line is, whatever we're doing, it's not a great option. But those are the things on the table, and hopefully those points helped. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think Joe, and probably that's it for the discussions, and then we'll go back to Hermione. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the best thing about full council is that we do generally come in here and hear those new ideas and new thoughts, and I think sort of tonight here has been no different really, and if anything more. You know, I never thought I'd be hearing local government reform compared to Crossrail, for example. If that means we're getting £18 billion for local government reform, then I'm flocking to local government reform like a Taylor Swift fan goes to a stadium tour. That's one for the 19.51% of the young people that might be part of our 3 unitary council there. Coming in, I had no notes, and I've managed to scribble quite a lot down. So sorry if this is a bit sort of here, there, everywhere. I might need to start a 5-minute timer myself. One thing that I haven't heard anyone really talk about is that one of the county council sort of missions, I'd say, is to try and unify the council or the county as one, really. You know, I think we're all very aware that there's a big east-west divide in the county, and all 3 proposals essentially entrench that divide further. I don't see how that's going to make things better, unifying, taking those 2 very different yet very powerful things together to make something better. I just don't see how that sort of fits in with these sort of proposals. And, you know, it's worth bearing in mind that whilst we've took 1 unitary off the table, the government haven't necessarily done so yet. You know, it could impose that on us. A mayor is almost certain at this point, as Councillor McAndrew said, with the PCCs going, you know, it feels as if the writing's on the wall. You know, we don't get that devolution we desperately need without a mayor, and I think the government have made that clear. It's not an ultimatum, but you know, I'll leave it at that. I have my reserves about a 1 unitary model, and so I'm glad it's sort of off the table for now when we're talking. But that does also mean that with the 3 options we have left, it feels like the 2 unitary is the only way we can sort of make the books balance. Yeah, close enough. You know, I feel like there's deliberate the way in that central government have put this on the table to us means that we have no option but to give deliberate uncertainty with especially with the 3 and the 4 option council options. So with my strategic head on, I want to say I'm going to vote for 2, but also I want to protest at this system in the first place. You know, so to vote for 4, but I still haven't made my mind up quite yet, and considering I might be the last person to speak, that's quite concerning. So I'm going to have a little think about this now. But at the end of the day, this is indicative. Why would you know, a minister, an MP from London, going to listen to little old Joe from Watton at Stone? You know, an MP from London. This is the city that had a sign up for weeks saying trains to Watton at Sea, let alone Watton at Stone. So we'll see on that. And I don't think they're proposing to make a man-made beach as part of local government reorganisation in the village. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So before I go to my only, just check. No one else? Oh, it's 2 more. So sorry, Sarah and then Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've also found this a really useful discussion, and it's I think I came into this thinking, I mean, 3 seems to be the I guess the compromise between breaking up services to the point where the financial side of it becomes challenging, and then becoming so big that it doesn't feel very democratic. And I think that's kind of the problem, that it feels like with it's hard to marry the 2 together. We all want, you know, democracy to be as localized as possible, and yet we have a responsibility to pick something that will be fiscally sustainable, because if it isn't, then what have we really achieved there? And I guess really it would be great as a plea to government and the you know, devolution bill, that we can have greater fiscal autonomy as part of the devolution process. And you know, I learned that we are the most fiscally centralized system in the world, I think. You know, we don't, I know Joe's already touched on this, but we don't get to decide what business rates we have or we keep, and the council tax is capped, and things like, I know other areas have looked at trying to introduce a tourism tax as a way of generating income, but that has to go through the Secretary of State. You know, a county puts together bus funding opportunities, and then, but that all has to be decided by, you know, government as to how much funding they get, and we're kind of at the mercy, and it feels like this process is just shuffling around the deck chairs. Whereas what we know is that councils, no matter who they're run by, are failing far more in the last decade than ever before, because it's just not financially achievable to deliver ever-growing services with such limitations on how to generate the income for that. So I feel like at this point I'm genuinely undecided and ambivalent, but this has been a really useful discussion, and I just need to go away and do some more thinking and reflecting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Simon.
I'll be quick. I feel like a blind man in an escape room and there's a crocodile outside the door which is unlocked. This is horrible. It's a bad thing to do at a bad time. It is shocking, and we're being forced into making a decision that we're going to pass up to somebody else that's going to make a decision that's going to go to someone else who's going to make another decision, and we're going to have no control over any of it. It's awful. And what worries me is that we're being forced into making a decision between money and democracy, and that can't be right. And where I really worry is about our young people. We have a very disengaged group of young people in this country. This is only going to make it worse, whichever way you cut it up. And I have veered between 2, 3, 4, 1. None of them work. It's horrible. The best, I think, is what Graham proposed. That's not on the table. Or the unitary. That's not on the table. So I don't know where I'm going to go. Am I going to stick a pin in a donkey's bum? Probably. I have no more to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So I will now revert to the seconder, Myeni.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I personally am not in favour of this massive reorganisation of local government. I can't see how it's going to make anything any better. I do agree with nearly everything which has been said by everyone, and I thank you all for your very very clear comments. Yes, and your very good speeches. I do have real serious concerns about the effects that these changes will have on local democracy. People may well fear that those who make the decisions about their services and about their lives are even further away than they are at the moment, that they are even more remote than they were previously. This will definitely be a big risk in rural areas like East Herts. I'm also very concerned about the future for local councillors. There will be a smaller number, and they will therefore all have much heavier workloads. They will possibly become like full-time professionals, and this will reduce the pool of possible future councillors who are either rich or retired. It will not be possible to be a new councillor without having means or without having the time. And this, I think, will be a very sad outcome. We really do need a mixture of people to be councillors, to represent the communities which they serve. We need a wide age range, and we need a wide range of backgrounds. So reducing the pool of potential future councillors will be seriously detrimental to democracy, and I have very great concerns about this. I came here this evening to listen. I do not wish to say how I will vote next Tuesday as a member of the executive, because I think that would indicate predetermination. So I've come to listen tonight, and I have heard all the good points which you have all made, and I think they have been very well made. So I will weigh everything up before I vote on Tuesday. And then the vote which we make at the executive next week will be made public. So then everyone will be able to see how we decided. So I hope you will excuse me if tonight I abstain in the vote. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marnie. It's up to you then, Ben, to sum up, answer any points.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone. I think there's loads of really great points. Lots of things that we agree with, and we all generally agree with each other, which is unheard of. That's really positive. I suppose so. I've had the dubious pleasure of spending almost a year now going to meetings on LGR, and so I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time thinking about the ins and outs of the data and the issues. And like you, I don't want this, but I recognise that that's the direction that we're going down. So with that in mind, I've just got some notes here really on my feelings based on really the evidence that we have in front of us rather than the bigger picture, and that's helped me form a view on what I feel is probably what I will vote for. And I think we've heard a lot of discussion about smaller councils leading to better decision making and democratic accountability, and I think that's really important. So let's start with the 4 unitary. So my view of the 4 unitary and the challenges that has. The proposed 4 East unitary has, at best, in the papers, a population of 280,000 residents. So that is the council tax base, isn't it? That's where much of a unitary's finances will come from in the future. In East Herts, so for us, that 280,000 is actually the smallest population for any of the unitaries in Hertfordshire. So that's a challenge. We'll also be one of the most rural of the 4 unitaries. We're the largest with the lowest population density. The paper says 395 residents per square kilometre. And that's between 3 and 5 times lower than any of the other 4 unitaries. That's challenging. The council services that we'll be delivering will be more expensive. So remember, we are going to be providing both not just district, but the county council services across our unitary. All of that, so that's, waste, health visits, we'll have more smaller village schools. All of those things mean that the services that we will supply, if we're in a 4 unitary here in East Herts, they will all take longer and they'll be more challenging to complete in a rural area. So what does that mean financially? So we really don't know how accurate the financial projections in these papers are, but I'm going to assume that there is benefit to them, that they are reasonably accurate, because that's after all we have to go on. So let's assume that they are correct. Well, if you look at them, the 4 unitary option takes the longest to break even, beyond 2034-35. If you look on page 83, you can see the 5 to 10 year cumulative savings graphs, and they show that in a 4 unitary, our unitary, East, will be the worst performing of the 4. Even after 10 years, there is a risk that our unitary will be the only one of the 4 still in deficit. Remember, we almost certainly will see financial shocks in future, whether they're another war, a pandemic, or issues with climate change. So we have to be financially responsible. We've got to be sure whatever unitary we propose is going to be strong. So we may not even have 280,000 residents. So that number assumes that the proposed boundary changes actually take place. So you heard the proposal for the 4 East unitary will involve taking a blob from North Herts and a blob from Welland and Hatfield. There is no guarantee that that will actually take place. That's down to the Secretary of State. Our submission includes a begging request to the Secretary of State to approve those changes. So there's a risk that we'll end up with just 250,000 residents in that unitary. So even smaller and less financially sustainable than the model suggests. So to summarise, the 4 unitary model delivers us the smallest population in the largest, most rural unitary plus a large dollop of financial risk. So I've come to the conclusion based on those facts, and I still believe that the 4 unitary model is not a responsible choice for our residents. That's as it stands. So that leaves the 2 and the 3. Data suggests that both the 2 and the 3 unitaries are financially resilient, with 2 the strongest, unsurprisingly. But to me, it feels like it's county council light model, effectively splitting county council in 2 and realigning the halves. Let's look at the number of councillors proposed, 117 across each of the 2 unitaries in the 2 model. The government has advised clearly that it will likely cut that to below 100 in a review post-unitarisation. So, in a 2 unitary, our councillor representation per resident will be similar or even less than in the 3 unitary, in a larger geography. So with a 2 unitary, I worry that decision making will be remote and the voice of councillors and residents will be weakened. So that leaves us with the 3 unitary option. Now, I really feel that it remains the least worst. It's a compromise, a pragmatic choice in a set of undesirables. It's got a larger population, 480,000, which will grow, but it's got a more balanced mix of rural and urban, plus a better representation of residents than the 2 model. The councillor representation is 93 for the 3 model. So that represents 3 councillors per county division. So that potentially is better. That will potentially be better than the 2 model. So the 3 unitary model, if you look at page 66, just to wrap up, there's a comparison table on page 66 in which you can see the 3 models side by side. And if you look at them, the 3 unitary is the most balanced option overall. Not always the best, but not the worst. Look at page 83. The financial modelling again suggests better long-term resilience, with the 3 East unitary having the strongest cumulative savings over 10 years of any of the 3 unitaries. All of our choices are compromises, let's be clear. But even after the discussion tonight, on balance, to me, the 3 unitary model currently remains the best choice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. So obviously, Bob.
Martin, just a point of order, I think. Just a point of order. I'm not sure this has quite been said, but certainly on behalf of our group, I'm sure on behalf of everybody, we're very aware that officers have done a huge amount of work on this. So through Helen and Brian, we'd like to say thank you very much. I'm sure I speak for everybody. And the second thing, possibly a bit more complicated, is that in as much as we're having a recorded vote this evening, will it be in that sense of the word a recorded vote at the exec meeting?
Ooh.
Will it be minuted which exec votes for what?
James, is that?
The way it's normally done at executive is that hands are raised, and with much fewer members, I think it'll be easier to see who has voted in which way. We won't need to do it in the way that we're doing it, so it won't be as recorded as we're doing tonight with, marking votes in an Excel spreadsheet. But we can certainly mark down who has voted in which way.
Yeah, I don't really mind if it's recorded in that sense, but I think everybody does need to know which exec member voted for what, if that can be organised. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So when Stephanie calls out your name, you need to give us the letter A, B, C, or abstain that you're voting in favour of. Oh. Okay. Sorry. So you either say 2 unitary, 3 unitary, or 4 unitary authority, or abstain, if you could. Okay. Thank you. Right. Okay, you ready?
Okay, so Councillor Adams.
I am specifically making a point for my colleague at County Hall. I am abstaining.
Councillor Andrews. Andrews, yeah.
The only way I can best represent my residents is by abstaining.
Thank you.
Boylan
I too am abstaining.
and Britton.
Abstain.
Eric Buckmaster,
Well, I'm going to vote for 4. Thank you.
Ruth Buckmaster,
I'm going to go for 4 unitaries.
Councillor Bull,
4.
Councillor Carter,
3.
Councillor Clements,
4.
Councillor Connolly,
3.
3. Councillor Copley,
2.
Councillor Cox,
Abstain.
Councillor Crystal,
3.
Councillor Dar,
3.
Councillor Deering,
Reluctantly 4.
Councillor Devonshire,
4.
Councillor Dumont,
Abstain.
Councillor Estock.
4.
Sorry, I missed out. Councillor Dunlop,
Yeah. 3.
Councillor Glover Ward,
Abstain.
Councillor Goldspink,
Abstain.
Councillor Hart,
4.
Councillor Hill,
3.
Councillor Hollybomb,
4.
and Councillor Holt,
4.
Councillor Hopewell,
Abstain.
Councillor Horner,
2.
Councillor Hoskin,
Abstain.
Councillor Marlow,
Abstain.
Councillor McAndrew,
Abstain.
Nichols,
Nicole. 3.
Councillor Passard-Wyatt,
4.
Councillor Redfern,
4.
Councillor Terry Smith,
Abstain.
Councillor Vicky Smith,
Abstain.
Councillor Stowe, Councillor Swainston,
2.
Councillor Thomas,
3.
Councillor Watson,
3.
Councillor Wilcox,
4.
Councillor Williamson,
4.
and Councillor Wilson.
3.
So the scores, I'll read them all out. For 2, there's 3 votes. For 3, there's 10 votes. And for 4, there is 15 votes. We also have 14 abstentions. So this indicative vote for obviously the executive's consumption would give that the 4-vote solution, the 4 unitary solution is the one preferred. Thank you very much. So I think this concludes this evening's proceedings. So at 20:58, this meeting is closed.